any kind of height, elevators, things like that, anything that you needed to see height that we couldn't get in Acton Lane, those all became our rear projection shots or miniatures.
One of the more interesting aspects of model work is the scaling of some of the things in it. Water is one of the obvious ones, which is always very difficult to achieve unless you can shoot with a large-scale miniature. And the same thing applies to fires and explosions. You have to get the power and size and scale and weight of an explosion right. And that can really only be done by adjusting the film speed. Fire, again, is a very tricky thing because of, the size of a flame is actually the size of a flame. So you have to do what you can to break the flames up into, the smallest tongues you can. You can do that with air, with wind, or with, just utilizing different types of explosive. I mean, naphthalene is one of the things that we've used greatly over the years to create an explosion that has that nice sort of red and black texture to it. Unfortunately, if you use a lot of naphthalene in model effects, it does tend at times to have a very languid look that tends to look a little bit model-y. So I always try and avoid it, or at least mix it with a lot of other things, so that you get a flame scale that works and looks right.
One of the sequences that was particularly difficult was the alien queen in the egg chamber. And it may seem like a fairly simple shot where we see the ovipositor depositing the egg onto the chamber floor. And for that we had built a quarter-scale egg chamber and an ovipositor, and we had the alien queen. But in actual fact, there were many, many, many elements going on at the same time. We had boilers under the set that had to come up to a proper temperature to get the steam to rise. We had freon blasts going in front of the camera that had to be coordinated as the camera panned. We had the quarter-scale egg sac, which was actually operated from behind to undulate very slowly. We had eggs, different scale eggs inside the egg sac that were being shunted along on cables, and we also had some transparent eggs that were just flat painted eggs that were moving along also inside of there to give a sort of a gelatinous look. We had a puppeteer reaching into the ovipositor to give the action of the ovipositor, and we had to have somebody underneath the set helping to bring the egg to the egg chamber floor and plant it there firmly so it wouldn't roll away. We had to hide the puppeteer with a mirror that was reflecting another part of the set so that he would be invisible. We had fog in the set, a certain level of fog. We had to slime right before we shot, we had to put a slime on the egg sacs that was dripping, and because if you waited too long, that stuff would drip away and you wouldn't see it. So there were all these interactive elements to create that shot. So again, it seemed like a fairly simple thing, but it was a particularly difficult one to coordinate all these effects. I tend to think of it more as real tech as opposed to low tech, because essentially reality is low tech. It's a real event that you're photographing, and there is no technology involved. So in a sense, we were trying to create an event in front of the camera and photograph it using tricks to do what wasn't possible to do physically full scale. For instance, the alien queen and the power loader just physically are too heavy and too big to move around in the way he wanted.
So resorting to quarter-scale miniatures filled in the rest of the shots to make the sequence work. The whole interior with a piece of the dropship was built in quarter-scale, and it was built up about 6 feet off the ground, so the puppeteers could get underneath and build this. And the Queen and Power Loader were built by Doug Beswick and Phil Notaro at his company in Los Angeles here. So what you had was a Power Loader that was about this big and a Queen that was about this big, and they had rods on their feet, and we cut little slots in the floor, and there would be a puppeteer under the floor sort of making these things walk. And then there was a bundle of cables, like bicycle cables, and there were a bunch of guys down there, puppeteers, pulling these levers to make the arms move and so forth.
Essentially, by staging it in a smaller version and using wires and cables hidden under the set, you're able to restage that almost, again, in real time and move the camera around in different positions and shoot different angles and have things like if you suddenly wanted moisture on the set or the alien dripping slime, you would just do it and not have to think, well, how much is that going to cost us to, post-production time to develop that as a digital effect and add it in. The next day you'd see it in the dailies, and if you needed to make a few adjustments, you could shoot it very quickly and just move on.
At the end of the movie, of course, the Queen and the power loader have fallen through this vertical shaft, and Ripley pulls a lever and the doors open, and you see the power loader tumble off into space. And the Queen is still attached. Well, we just took this set piece, this miniature, up to the top of the stage, mounted it up there, and we had a huge bit of material, and Brian Johnson had come in at this point to help out towards the end, and so Brian had rigged all this stuff, and we were going to release this thing, and he put some Christmas tree lights down for stars on. Basically, it was almost a just a safety net to catch the power loader. We only had one of these miniatures, and it was the one that was fully articulated, so it weighed a ton. Well, when they released it, it's a great shot. It fell, and all the people holding this material as sort of a safety net, it actually hit the material and went right down to the stage floor. It exploded, and it was one of those things that happens. And so we hot glued it all back together with hot glue sticks and painted it yellow and did it again because it's a quick shot. We were done with the thing. So really, by the end of it, it was just a pile of junk. And I have a photograph with Phil Notaro, who came out to oversee that stuff, so you can see how bad it was. But eventually it was rebuilt, and I think it's in Jim's office now.
When I think about the film, I think not only of the hardship of making the film, but also the conditions that the film was shot under, which is pretty challenging in themselves. On the other hand, that weather put us kind of in the mindset for the film, thinking about these troopers landing on a hostile planet, sort of cold and windswept, and we were in that mode all the time. As a matter of fact, we're shooting wind streaking across these rocks. In some cases, we'd open up the stage door and the wind would blow dust and dirt across the set, just like in our shots.
Between all the hot chocolate and coffee, I remember running with cups of coffee between stages, and between all the colds and flus that we had, apparently there was some strange alien germ that had taken over our bodies at that point, which in fact probably was the case. Overall, the mood of it was basically what Robert is saying, is I just felt like we were part of that, and it's just reflected in the setting at Pinewood Studios, which had all the perfect background for us.
After the first few months of shooting, which was very rough because we were Americans coming in, and a British studio system, is that we started developing real camaraderie with the British crew, and we both found new ways of working together, and he started becoming more active in, like, oh, we could do this, we could put this piece together, and there's a kind of a truss work over by East Stage, couldn't we bring that in and use that as part of the set? Everybody started getting in on the filmmaking process, which is not really the standard way that the British system works. So we started creating an effects studio on essentially a live-action studio lot, and I think that camaraderie, it was a kind of a visceral experience from that standpoint.